Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking shouldn't be strange. This is a cuneiform tablet. Cuneiform is an ancient script. Mesopotamian cultures used it. It was invented by the Sumerians, and it was adopted by the Akkadians, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians, and a few other civilizations too. Now, some say that we have references to aliens, to extraterrestrials in tablets like this one. Is that true? Well, let's find out. Do cuneiform tablets really prove that aliens once visited Earth? Well, to go after this question, we need to start with really 4 introductory questions. Who makes this claim? Who are the ones, the writers, the teachers, people out there on TV or on the internet that actually try to argue this point? And then what are the specifics of the claim? Thirdly, can these arguments actually be tested? That's going to be important. And then fourth and lastly, what is the outcome of that testing? Now, we'll take these questions in order, and I want to start with the first 2 of them. Who makes this claim, and what are the specifics of the claim? Ancient alien visitation of Earth is not a recent idea. It's actually a pretty old one. Now, the idea that there might be other worlds and those worlds might be populated by intelligent extraterrestrials, that goes way back to the early centuries AD. The idea that those intelligent extraterrestrials might have visited us, though, is a little more recent, roughly the 1800s to, of course, the modern time. It's still an idea that's quite popular. Now, you're probably most familiar with this idea through the writing of someone called Erich von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods, or maybe Ancient Aliens, the TV show. That show has featured von Däniken in certain episodes and of course featured his work. But the specific ties to cuneiform tablets is something unique to someone called Zecharia Sitchin. Now, Zecharia Sitchin was a well-known author. His major work on this is called The 12th Planet. It was written in the 70s. It was actually part of a series, The Earth Chronicles. Sitchin was a Russian-American author. He died in 2010 at the age of 90, but by the time of his death, he had sold tens of millions of books in over 20 languages. Since his death, Sitchin's immense popularity has sort of been capitalized upon by others, namely Jason Martell and Michael Tellinger. If you were to look up cuneiform tablets, Sumerians, and ancient aliens, these are the names you're going to get in addition to Zecharia Sitchin. So those are the players. But what about the claims? What do they actually argue? Now, what specifically does Zecharia Sitchin say that the cuneiform tablets say about aliens visiting Earth? Well, the specifics are this. Sitchin claims that the tablets describe an alien race known as the Anunnaki, who were worshipped by the Sumerians and civilizations afterward. The Anunnaki came from Nibiru, which was, according to Sitchin, a planet beyond Pluto. Now, this planet, and again, Sitchin claims that the tablets actually tell us this, cycled through the solar system and sort of got in our neighborhood and appears in our neighborhood every 3,600 years. And during one of these cycles, the Anunnaki sort of got off the boat and they visited Earth. When they got to Earth, they genetically engineered primates and made us, human beings. You say, well, why would they do that? Well, the Anunnaki liked gold. It was important to them, and so they wanted to create a race of slaves to mine gold. Now, all of these claims can be tested and deserve attention. What we're going to do is take a look at the tablets and ask the very simple question, do the cuneiform tablets actually speak of an extraterrestrial race known as the Anunnaki who come from a planet called Nibiru? The way we're going to determine if this is valid or not is to go to the primary sources. I'm going to show you a website called the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature. On that website, you can actually search the cuneiform tablets for what they say about the Anunnaki. You don't need to go out and learn Akkadian or Sumerian. You can go to this resource and test the claims of Zecharia Sitchin and others who promote his ideas. So let's do that. We're here at the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature website. Now what we need to do is go to where it says Advanced Search and click on that link, and that's going to take us to the search page. And in the field that says Search For, we want to type A-NUN-NA. Now this is Anuna, it's not Anunnaki. Anuna is the lexical form of the word that will capture both forms of this name. Anuna, Anunnaki, same group of deities in Sumerian literature. We want to make sure that we select, instead of form, lemma, and that will capture everything, either Anuna or Anunnaki. So we want to just hit our return key, and what we get is 182 lines in the cuneiform tablets about the Anunnaki. Now you'll notice in the middle column that we have Anuna, and the hit below that is Anun-K, that's Anunnaki. So we get both results in our search. And you say, well, I can't read any of that because I don't know Sumerian either in cuneiform or in transliteration. Well, you don't have to know that. If you look at the second line, there's a little TR right here. If we click on that, that takes us to an English translation of that particular line in that particular tablet. What we have here is a database. This database will allow you to get to every place where the cuneiform tablets talk about the Anunnaki, or the Anuna, the shorter form of the term. You can check the claims of Zecharia Sitchin yourself. All you have to do is click through each hit, each occurrence, and just read the text in English. And you will find something pretty surprising, at least to those who really buy into ancient astronaut theory, specifically that you find all this information in cuneiform tablets. You're going to find that that idea is quite lacking in the primary sources. Now, I'm sure it would be a thrill, maybe at least for me, to go through all 180 lines of our search, looking at each one individually, validating what I can sort of summarize for you right here, though. And that is, the primary texts refute the claims of Zecharia Sitchin and anyone else who puts forth his ideas that we have Anunnaki, an alien race from a planet called Nibiru, that visited Earth. There are no texts, and not even a single line of a cuneiform text, that affirm that the Anunnaki are from Nibiru. I'll take it even further than that. There isn't a single text that associates the Anunnaki with Nibiru in any way at all. Now that might sound like an outlandish claim, but I've just shown you the search, and you can do the search for yourself. You could take the time to go through all 180 or so lines and validate or invalidate a claim. My claim, again, is that the cuneiform tablets don't have this information. So what's important is that we stick to primary sources for what we say that an ancient person believed, or something that happened in the ancient world that might be referenced in a particular piece of literature, like a cuneiform tablet. We need to go to the tablets themselves. The search item, again, you can do for yourself. You go to our website about this episode. I will reproduce what you need to type in right there, and you can run the search for yourself. We're not done with the Anunnaki, though. There's a lot more to think about. They may not be extraterrestrials, but we just saw they show up in cuneiform texts a lot. So who in the world were the Anunnaki? That's what we want to take a look at next. These figurines that you see are put forth by ancient alien theorists as being examples, illustrations, depictions, idols of the Anunnaki. You'll notice that they are reptilian in form, they are lizard-like, and so the claim is that the Anunnaki were reptilian aliens. Now, these figures are actually very well known to Mesopotamian archaeologists. They are not a mystery. There are many publications about them. One such publication is a book entitled Beyond the Ubaid. And in this book, there's a specific chapter on these figurines. The chapter is entitled A Snake in the Grass, Reassessing the Ever-Intriguing Ophidian Figures. Ophidian is an academic term for serpentine or reptilian. Now, I want to read a little bit of this article to see how professional Mesopotamian archaeologists who are very familiar with these figurines, what they actually say about them. 25 figurines were discovered at the site of Ur. 2 of them come from a house in Pit F, dated to the early Ubaid period. They were found along with domestic and utilitarian artifacts, such as pottery, pounders, grinders, flint hoes, clay sickles, net sinkers, and spindle whorls, attesting to their probable use alongside or during everyday activities. Other later Ubaid figurines from Pit F were found in loose soil, in rubbish strata, mixed with Ubaid pottery of earlier phases. Now, did you catch that phrase, in rubbish strata? That means they were actually found in garbage pits. That really isn't the kind of thing that you would do if the thing you were throwing away was an item of worship, a sacred object. But nevertheless, this is where some of these figurines were actually found. So how do we evaluate the figurines against what we actually get in archaeology? Well, we need to think about that. The truth is that these figurines that ancient alien theorists put forth to us as being representations of the Anunnaki, their use is really unknown. Nobody really knows what these things are. What they represented is also unknown. How they were used is frankly unknown. Now, we just saw or read that they were found among very simple everyday objects, and sometimes even in trash pits. So it's pretty doubtful that these would be sacred objects. You don't just throw those things in the trash. There's no known connection as well to the Anunnaki. And you say, well, how do we know that? Well, we know that because of the archaeology, and we've actually given you the answer to this in the quotation and even back in the picture of the figurines themselves. The Ubaid culture is prehistoric. No one in the field disputes this. You say, well, who cares? What's the big deal? Why should we be concerned if they're prehistoric? How does that answer the question of whether these are the Anunnaki or not? If they're prehistoric, roughly 5,500 to 4,000 BC is where archaeologists put these things. That is before the invention of writing, even in Sumer, the earliest writing that we know. That means that there is no writing on them. Now, we've already seen, again, if you repeat the search, you can validate this, that the Anunnaki are not described. They're not associated with another planet from Nibiru. None of these things are actually in the text. And now we're in a situation where we have these objects and nothing is written on them. And because they're prehistoric, they weren't found with anything else that had writing. There is literally nothing that associates these figures with the beings known as the Anunnaki. Now, we've seen there's no reason to associate the Ubaid figurines with the Anunnaki. We have no written text that makes that association, and the figurines themselves are prehistoric. Having any kind of textual information at all is going to be impossible because when they were made, writing did not exist in Sumer. Nevertheless, the Anunnaki are in a lot of texts. We've already seen that as well. So who were they? Well, the primary sources are the place to go for that information. The most recent project on Sumerian to collect the data and produce for scholars a dictionary of Sumerian literature is the electronic Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary Project. This is a project run at the University of Pennsylvania, and the dictionary is also published in hard copy. There are a few volumes out. The first one actually has the entry for Anunnaki. The name, according again to the text, does not mean those who from heaven came. That's a famous Sitchin translation for the term Anunnaki. It actually means princely seed, or someone who is high-born or noble. It's the idea of nobility. You also see on the internet translations like offspring of Anu, the sky god. And again, arguments try to make a connection between sky god, which is An, and extraterrestrials. But that's actually not a very good translation for a simple reason. The word's usage. In the Sumerian tablets, and again, the PSD, the Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary, is going to note this, Anunnaki is actually a term used of people on occasion. Just normal people and their siblings. Now that makes sense if the term means princely seed or highborn or nobility. One human being could refer to another human being along those lines, in those terms. So there's nothing inherently about the term that has to mean some sort of descendant of deity, descendant of the sky god. There's nothing like that in and of itself. However, most of the uses of Anunnaki are referring to a group of gods in Mesopotamian religion. Now we could ask the question at this point, are these high gods or low gods? And the answer in Mesopotamian religion, Sumerian religion, is, well, they're actually both. They're both because in some texts they are very highly elevated, very highly regarded, and in other texts they are consigned to the underworld. They have low status. A good place to get this kind of information about the Anunnaki is also another source from the University of Pennsylvania, the Mesopotamian Gods and Goddesses Project. Now, Penn, for many years, was the center of Sumerian scholarship, really since the early 20th century. And you say, well, thanks for the history lesson, why should I care? Well, you should care because Samuel Noah Kramer was the Sumerian professor there. He was still there when I was there. Penn is one of my alma maters. But Kramer was an important Sumerian scholar at this particular place. And I mentioned him because Zecharia Sitchin quotes a lot from Samuel Noah Kramer's writings. Now, Kramer knew what the term Anunnaki meant. So why would Sitchin sort of either not quote him in that regard or misquote him or sort of ignore the information? Well, I have to leave that for you to decide. But the authority that Sitchin relies on for certain points of his writing would have disagreed when it comes to the meaning of the term Anunnaki and, of course, all the extraterrestrial stuff. Now, finally, if you go to the Penn site, the Project on Gods and Goddesses, it will point out that there are no known artistic depictions of the Anunnaki. We know that they are not the Ubaid figurines because, again, nothing tells us that. There's no text, and they're prehistoric. There's no written material at all to associate one thing with the other. The Anunnaki are also sort of interesting because there's no known cult or sanctuary in Mesopotamian archaeology, which is quite a big field. There's no known system of worship associated with them. Now, again, we don't have all the information. There's lots that hasn't been discovered. So someone might dig up some cult center somewhere that mentions the Anunnaki. We don't know. But to date, there is no evidence that they were even worshipped. And again, if you go back to the figurines, some of them wind up in the trash heap. So what we have here is essentially, if you're going to defend the idea that these figurines are the Anunnaki, or that the Anunnaki come from Nibiru, or any of these sort of famous ideas associated with the Anunnaki by ancient alien theorists, you've got an argument from silence. There is actually no primary source data to support any of this at all. So where does this leave us? Well, we can conclude that the Anunnaki were indeed Mesopotamian gods, but their status varied. Sometimes they were depicted as high gods, other times low gods. We can conclude that they were not extraterrestrials. There is nothing in the cuneiform material that indicates that at all. And again, we are trying to go back to primary sources. They were also not the serpentine Ubaid figures. Again, there's no writing associated with those figures. They're prehistoric. We have nothing upon which to base this idea. Ultimately, what we have is, as I mentioned before, a glorified argument from silence. Now, what we need to do and concentrate on is primary sources, and that's what we do here at Fringe Pop 321. Please check out our website. We will have show notes dedicated to this episode, sources for you to go to look up. And again, don't just depend on our word for it. Do the work yourself, do the research yourself. It is within your grasp to find out and to answer these questions. Tune in next time for our next episode because what you know may not be so.